you are 450 years old, you need a great deal of sleep.
Well, that's very considerate of you, Victoria, but between you and me, I'm really quite lively, actually, all things being considered. Are you happy with us, Victoria?
Yes, I am. At least, I would be if my father were here.
Yes, I know.
I wonder what he would have thought if he could see me now.
You miss him very much, don't you?
It's only when I close my eyes. I can still see him standing there before those horrible Dalek creatures came to the house. He was a very kind man. I shall never forget him. Never.
No, of course you won't. But, you know, the memory of him won't always be a sad one.
I think it will. You can't understand being so ancient.
Eh?
I mean old.
Oh.
You probably can't remember your family.
Oh, yes, I can when I want to. And that's the point, really. I have to really want to bring them back in front of my eyes. The rest of the time, they sleep in my mind, and I forget. And so will you. Oh, yes, you will. You'll find there's so much else to think about, to remember. Our lives are different to anybody else's. That's the exciting thing. Nobody in the universe can do what we're doing.
Hello and welcome to Who Watches Who, a Doctor Who podcast with me, Matthew, and as always,
I'm Scott. Hello.
Hello. This week we are continuing our deep dive into the tomb of the Cybermen. This is part 2. Last week was part 1. That's how parts work.
That's how numbers work. Yes.
Yeah. In this episode, we will be covering episodes 3 and 4 of the Tomb of the Cybermen story. And I'm looking forward to jumping into it, specifically this episode, which is episode 3, because this is my favorite one in the story.
It is a very good episode, and obviously last week's cliffhanger, we saw the Cybermen come out of their tombs, and that was a very intense cliffhanger.
Very long one. a very long cliffhanger. They took their time coming out.
I think it did something for kids in 1967, because Episode 2 had 6.4 million viewers, and this episode shot right up to 7.2, so like 800,000 people tuned in for this episode based on last week's cliffhanger, I guess. So yeah.
There was quite the story around the water cooler.
I just imagine kids being in the playground being like, oh my god, did you see Doctor Who? Did you see Doctor Who?
Yeah, and then they all get beat up for being nerds.
Is that something that happened to you? Is that why you're saying it?
Yeah, I got beat up in the 1960s when I was at school, telling everyone to watch Doctor Who.
Serves you right. You ginger fuck.
Yep. Shall we jump into this episode then?
Of course.
We have decided how you will be used.
Yes?
You are a logician. Our race is also logical. You will be the leader of the new race.
You will listen to my proposals then?
Yes, we will listen, but first you will be altered.
Altered?
You have fear. We will eliminate fear from your brain. Yes, you will be the first. And you will be the next.
No!
You will be like us.
Like every episode, this one picks up immediately where the last one left off, but interesting editing choice here. The Doctor Who theme song continues inward as the Cybermen starts talking.
Yes, I noticed that too. I really like it, to be honest. It's weird, but
I've never seen Doctor Who do it before. But it is quite cool.
And then, of course, it fades out and we get the very loud horn.
It doesn't blend so well with the theme song.
It's just like, bah!
We see the Cyberman, to wrap up the cliffhanger that happens, the cyber leader, whatever his name is, Mr. Big Brain Robot Boy, explains that the trap was so complicated because they wanted Big Brain Boys to come and solve it, to release the Cybermen. It's like this logic puzzle that only smart people can solve, and then when you solve it, you die. So that's what being a nerd gets you.
It's a really cool premise, though. Like, usually they just want to take over the Earth, but here it's like they've got a good plan set up.
Yeah, they want all the big brain people, which is why, what's her name? Elizabeth, is it Liz? Victoria?
Yes,
Victoria. Yes, that's why I was trying to think like era, and I was thinking Elizabethan, but no, it's not Elizabethan, it's Victorian, so she's called Victoria. And that's why Victoria gets left behind, because she's dense. And as we see when she comes running in the next scene with the pilots being like, "Start the levers, I don't know what to do,
Also, one thing I've noticed with the Cybermen is, in this episode specifically, they kind of pop their P's, because there's a point where the cyber leader is saying "planet," and he kind of pops his P's in the mic.
I never noticed that.
So apparently the guy doing the Cyberman voice had like a tube inside of his mouth, and it was very uncomfortable. So I guess that explains why it's kind of hard to hear him sometimes.
Why did he have a tube in his mouth?
To make the Cyberman noise, my dude.
Right.
Yeah,
see, in my head, I'm just like, yeah, they just overdub it. Like,
yeah, there was like a tube in the mouth to like cause vibrations, which made the robot sound or something like that. It's very complicated 60s tech, but apparently it's very uncomfortable. It doesn't sound very It doesn't sound very comfortable at all.
It creates a pretty good sound, though.
Yeah, it does. But for this one, I had to have the subtitles on because I could not understand the Cybermen sometimes.
Yeah, a lot of the time I couldn't understand the Cybermen, but I just left subtitles off because I like ignorance, it's bliss. But, you know, that plays into what we were talking about last week with the Cybermen voices. Because I think this one's okay, but yeah, you really do struggle to hear what they're saying sometimes, whereas with the Hartnell Cybermen, you know, they just sound like British people that sometimes elongate their words. You can understand what they're saying. I still think, you know, the best mix of that is probably the more modern Cybermen. I think, obviously, with just modern technology, you can get a robotic voice with understanding what everybody's saying. But yeah, this one, it can be a bit difficult.
Yeah, also, this is the third Cyberman story in under a year. It's very interesting just to see how much they've changed over this year. It's insane just to think about all the changes. Compared to the Daleks, you don't even change that much.
Yeah. Which, you know, could play into why they never got popular. They were never consistent, you know.
Good point. But they're vaguely consistent. They all have the handlebars in their heads.
Which is a very important design.
Yes.
Why they specifically have handlebars, we don't know, but they're there. But this scene we get into next is Victoria running around screaming as two men make fun of her, which it's not the best scene for Victoria's character. She's, you know, because she went out last episode to get the pilots to come and help because Evil Lady was evil. And so that's what's happened. The Evil Lady's currently unconscious, but we see that she's faking her unconsciousness and she's actually awake as Victoria screams around like, "It's got to be one of the levers, pull the lever, they're trapped in here." And one of the guys keeps calling her Vic, and she despises that. And this scene ends with them making fun of her, where she's like, "I think it's one of these levers." And then the guy goes, "Oh, she thinks." And that's where we cut away, and it's like, this is a mean scene towards Victoria.
Yeah, it's a very awkward, sexist scene, especially since you're considering these people are from the future, so it should be more equal society.
You got to remember, this is the bit in the future where we decided that the 1960s were a good time and just reverted culture back there for like a brief moment before going back. The future is very skew-whiff.
It's like how nobody in the future has smartphones in the 1960s shows.
Yeah.
But one of the men says they can't see much wrong here. They say it as there's an unconscious woman lying on the floor.
It's not a great scene.
No, it's not.
But we then, after they make fun of Victoria and nothing much happens, we cut back to the Doctor, and he gets asked by Scottish man. I forget everybody's name. It's been a week since we recorded. Goddamn.
Jamie.
Jamie's like, what should we do? And then the Doctor says the one thing that when they say it in Classic Who, I go, oh no. Where the Doctor says, we play for time. We wait and see what happens. Like, there's already enough filler. Like,
And of course, Jamie says, "Can we not make a run for it, Doctor?" which is his catchphrase. A very good catchphrase, I thought.
so there's something the Doctor says here. So he goes up and starts talking to the Cyber leader. And the Cyber leader's like, wow, you're so smart. We love you. And the Doctor's like, oh, thanks so much. I'm blushing. But then he says, like, the lunar surface. And so I'm assuming that was an earlier episode with Cybermen on it where they were on the moon whaling.
Yeah.
Were they whalers on the moon?
A nice Futurama reference. But yes, that's a reference to the Moon Base, a story that only aired like 5 months before this. So
Is it a good one or is it a smelly one?
I haven't seen it in like 15 years, so I can't remember.
Is that what I asked?
I remember it being interesting. It was weird.
The Cybermen in this are almost sympathetic. Specifically, the Cyber leader as he's talking to the Doctor here, where he's like, you know, we were on that moon attacking because we had no supplies and we were dying. We were fighting for our lives because you just destroyed our entire planet. Like, genocide happened against us and we're just trying to live. And it's like, are the Cybermen good guys in this? What like?
That's what I love about the Cybermen. They see what they're doing as something that's good for humanity, like prolonging life and just erasing emotions like fear and anything like that. Just they see themselves as a good people in their own story, which is really compelling. And I wish they would play more on that in the new era of Doctor Who, because they've really just gone like.
I think the issue that they had with Cybermen in the new era, and it was cool when they did it with Tennant, to bring the Cybermen back where they're from another dimension, and that was like a clever way of making the Cybermen reappear again, but it kind of shoehorned them into now the Cybermen can't come back because they're from another dimension, and so when the Cybermen have come back, it's been kind of underwhelming and convoluted as to who they are and where they've come from and things like that. And I don't think there's really been a good Cybermen episode in years.
I would say the Mary Shelley episode was the best Cyberman story in years. You know, when Cyberman is like an analogy for like Frankenstein. I think that's a really good Cyberman episode.
Is that the Jodie episode? The ghost Yeah, that was
Yes.
a very good episode, yeah.
But then it got ruined, like it got ruined by being connected to the Timeless Child.
The Timeless Child, yeah.
But
yeah,
alone,
because they were Time Lord Cybermen, weren't they?
yeah. But alone, that episode was really good.
That season itself was really good until the end. I remember really enjoying that season and being like, oh, each episode's kind of like there's good stuff in each episode, and then the finale is.
It really was. But we'll get to that someday.
Then, in a pretty terrifying scene, the Cyber leader says that they're going to turn everybody into Cybermen, and then all the Cybermen, who, previously we've seen move incredibly, I want to emphasize how incredibly slow they were moving before, which was incredibly slow. We then see all the Cybermen rush the Doctor and all the people that are there, and a pretty terrifying scene. Like, there is so many Cybermen swarming and grabbing at them. In that, and they're moving quick. It's unlike what we've seen them move before. It's pretty spooky.
To be fair on them, when they were moving very slowly, they just got unfrozen, and they just got awoken from like a 100-year nap or whatever. So I don't blame them for being slow.
Oh yeah, no. I think it's a good bit of a way of building tension. And I like the idea that the Cybermen, say like it wasn't because they were frozen, but the Cybermen move slow on purpose, because they're robot people. So it's like almost to put their enemies at ease, where they're like, oh, they're slow. We don't need to worry about them. We can just get away. And then it's like, oh no, when they want to get you, they can just click and zoom and get you. Like it's a pretty terrifying concept.
That's a good thought, yeah. But then we get a very kind of confusing scene featuring a doorway, and Jamie runs right. The Cyberman gets confused, turns left, So obviously we're facing different directions. I mean, all of a
And
sudden
then-
we cut for the next shot, and Jamie is in front of a Cyberman.
Well, see, Jamie turns right in the door. The Cyberman goes to the door, looks at where Jamie went, and then goes left and goes that way. And then we see Jamie run from the way he was, where he was safe, to where the Cyberman went. And then the next scene, he's somehow in front of the Cyberman.
Yeah. It's really weird and confusing.
And then the Cyberman walks past him, but he was already safe from the Cyberman. The Cyberman already wasn't going for him. Like,
And then Jamie kind of runs around a pillar for some reason.
he didn't need to. He could have just turned around. And then he gets zapped by a Cyberman.
Who was
With
somehow there.
not very good visual effect that doesn't line up with the hand.
No, it does. But to be fair, so we achieve these kind of effects by we have one camera facing on like a shock, I don't know what you would call that. It's like give me a second. I've written it down. So we have one camera focusing on like a spark generator, and another camera focusing on the actors, and we kind of like fade the camera so that the shock generator is kind of appearing on the image of the two actors, which is a weird way to do it, but yeah, it worked.
It is a weird way to do it, but yeah, it kind of works if the guy's hand was just a little bit lower.
But yeah, we'll talk about that later on a little bit, because there's more of that, but the actors obviously have to be in a very specific standing position, and it doesn't work all the time.
We then get a pretty cool, I say pretty cool, it's pretty fun scene that I'm sure at the time was pretty terrifying. Now it's a bit, you can understand how they did it, where the Cyberman picks up Servant Man, whose name I have forgotten.
Toberman.
He picks up, like, they're struggling, and then he picks Toberman up above his head like he weighs nothing, which, why was he struggling if you can pick him up like that? But, it's a cool way of showcasing just how strong these Cybermen are, because we established in earlier episodes that Toberman is this big, strong guy who can open these big, heavy doors, etc., but now the Cyberman's picking him up as if he's being held up by string, as if some sort of wire system is holding him above his head. He looks so light and featherless, and it's a pretty cool scene.
And there's also a great use of film, because usually most of this episode is shot on tape, but sometimes we'll insert film, and there's good shots. There's a high angle of Toberman fighting against the Cyberman, which is really dynamic. And also, yeah, when the Cyberman lifts Toberman up, you can clearly see the wire. Did you notice the wire? Because I'm sure you did notice the wire.
I didn't notice it the first time I watched it. The thing that I noticed was just how quick he moved. He moves like really unnaturally up. Like, it's as if you're looking at it on a stage. It's like, woo, he's Peter Pan suddenly. Like...
But yeah, you'll notice the wire is just very obvious, especially there's like a black bit in the background. You'll just see there's a little white speck that goes down the screen. But I am wondering, would it be better if they took out weird wires like that in like the DVD releases and all that, like a special edition? Would you like that? I would like that if we could see the original as well.
Yeah, as long as the original was there. Because
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind it, but also I want to see how it first aired. I want to see the original unedited, not unedited, but the original broadcast version. Just for prosperity's sake,
Because that's what we've been doing with some of the Blu-rays. We've been like putting in CGI elements. Like if there's a space battle, for example, they'll try and make it look like it came from the 70s, while at the same time making it look more realistic in a way. And I think that's a good way of doing it, rather than whatever George Lucas did with his movies.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I have the theatrical cut of the George Lucas ones on DVD, because they came in a special edition one, so I've got both the remaster and the original cut. But I have THX 1138, I think, is what it's called. George Lucas's first film, his student film that he made when he was in university. And it's pretty good. It's really weird. But what he's done, it's like the Blu-ray remaster of it, and George Lucas, being George Lucas, has gone and added a bunch of CGI scenes, and like they're cool CGI scenes, and they kind of fit the tone and the style of the film itself. But it's like There is no way this is what the film was like in the
Yeah.
60s when you made this, George. What are you on about? Like,
Yeah, like when I'm watching A New Hope and a dinosaur walks across the screen, I'm like, this does not look like it's made in 1977. It does not look like it fits at all.
yeah, but, you know, I can live with it. I don't mind that much because those are, you know, obviously the ones that I grew up with. And so it's like I'm used to those ones. If I had grown up with the original cut and then gone to this, it would definitely be a bit weird. But there, you know, there are good things in the remaster as well.
Yeah, like Cloud City.
Like Cloud City, like the Emperor in the original cut. You know, he's this
Yes.
terrifying, like horribly make-up dude, and then they just got like episode 3 Emperor and just stuck him in. Like, it's definitely a mix of good and bad, but yeah. Then we go back to Victoria, and I'm really just not a big fan of these scenes in general. I much prefer the stuff with the Cybermen and the Doctor than these ones. These ones, one, haven't aged super well, and two, I think are a little bit boring. So we see the pilot people working on the levers and they're like, oh, I think this will work it if we do this, but be careful. And then we see Evil Lady wake up and dart across the room and grab a gun and point it at them and be like, I'm going to shoot you. I'm the bad guy all along. And then they're like, oh no, don't shoot us, please. We're good guys. Why would you close the hatch? And her reasoning's really weird. Her reasoning was Klieg must be undisturbed. You know, and who's going to disturb him while he's down there? Everybody's down there. That was the plan, was to go down there. And then she's like, so people can't run away as well, which makes more sense that people can't run away. But, you know, him being undisturbed really doesn't matter much because they're very much disturbed down there at the moment.
I imagine she's thinking like, oh, he's having some sort of business meeting down there. They're negotiating and all that. But also she picks up the gun that Victoria dropped last episode. Like, Victoria, keep the gun. Don't leave it on the ground, you stupid idiot.
She put it down for no reason. And then she's holding everyone at gunpoint. And Victoria sees the dead Cyberman. The wee mouse thing before. And then she screams very awkwardly. Like, there's a pause on her, and then she screams, which distracts Evil Lady, and then they just pin her down and grab the gun. And it's not a great scene.
Yeah, it's very awkwardly staged as well. It was much more clearer in the script, apparently, but in this episode, it just comes across as just like, wait, what the hell happened?
Yeah, it's awkward, and it honestly, it just feels like padding to get the hatch open, like, because then they open the hatch.
And then one of the men is like, "Oh, you scream real good, Vic." It's like, really?
There's a weird exchange with Victoria and the pilot man. So the pilot man, who, by the way, I'm not a big fan of his performance. He's very British. He's very that's not even right. It's like very old school. It's almost like Thunderbirds.
Yeah,
it reminds me of Thunder. He even looks like a Thunderbird with his haircut, but like it's that style and that like accent, which I just can't do. But he tells Victoria that he's going to go down, and then there's a really weirdly awkward exchange with him and the other pilot where he's like, what's in those bombs? Smoke. Cool, give them to me. Yeah, okay, hurry up. yeah. And then he gets the bombs, and he goes back to go down the hatch, and Victoria's like, I'll come with you, and then he's like, no, you can come next time. And then Victoria goes, who'd be a woman?
Yeah.
Which I guess she's talking about herself being a woman and not being able to go, but it's not very aged good. Well,
yeah. Apparently, Victoria was supposed to comment on like with sexism more in the script, but then it got changed last minute to be this, whatever this is. Like she was supposed to like mock the people for acting stronger than they are. But yeah, it comes across as really awkward and weird.
Yeah. We then get another scene with the Cybermen. And, you know, as much as I do enjoy this episode, I feel like there's a lot of repetition. Mm-hmm. So in this episode, we get one piece of new information where the evil man, the logician man who started all of this, is going to become the new leader of the Cybermen, which I thought was like, oh, okay, that's a pretty classy move from the current leader of the Cybermen to just so willingly give up power like that. And they're like, oh, we're going to turn you into a Cyberman, and then they turn to the next guy, and he's like, and you're going to be the next Cyberman, you're going to be like us, which they've said like 3 times in this episode already. Like, they're really hammering home what the Cybermen are going to do without ever doing anything. They're just sitting there and being like, we're going to turn you into Cybermen. We're going to turn you into Cybermen. We're going to turn you into It's like, we get it, okay?
Well, they have to buy time for their plans to be foiled.
They've got to make sure the episode's 20 minutes long.
But yeah, the pilot starts throwing the smoke bombs, and one of the Cybermen gets confused and starts spreading his arms and spins around like an airplane.
He's helicopter parroting, and they're like in The Simpsons, you know. He starts T-posing, like he completely breaks down into what's going on. It's very, very silly. I don't get why smoke would do this to them either. Like, smoke of all things is going to really mess them up. I don't get it.
Well, to be fair, when they come back later on in like the 70s and 80s, their weakness is gold. Like, they just die if they get gold shoved in their accordions. The accordions being like the thing in front of them, the weird breathing. I don't know what it is.
It's like Darth Vader's health pack thing that's on his chest.
I like to call them accordions. I like just imagining them being like Weird Al just playing the accordion.
That would be great to see. I would love to see that. Yeah, I never realized how weird the blocking is for the first half of this episode. Like, the smoke bombs against the Cybermen tombs, like, there's no Cybermen there, and then they all walk towards the smoke and go, oh no, there's smoke everywhere, what are we gonna do? and then, like, the Doctor and that escape. And, like, earlier with Victoria and stuff, the blocking's super weird. I think something must have got lost between page and script with the, like, where everybody's supposed to be and how things are working for this episode in particular.
And just remember, they only had like a week to rehearse this and like 75 minutes to actually film this. 75 minutes to film it, so I imagine it must be really tough for them on a multicam setup as well, doing it almost live. Also, I feel like the smoke bombs would do more damage to the humans than it would the Cybermen. Like, the Cybermen just can't see. That's the only thing it does.
We even see, like, when everyone's running away, the Doctor and the pilot guy are, like, choking. Like, oh, we need to find a way out of here. We can't breathe. And the Cybermen at this point are just walking around like everything's okay. It's like, you've hurt yourself a bit more there than
Yeah. The Cybermen are just, like, waving away the smoke clouds, and that's all they're doing.
But then we see Toberman. He's the only one that gets captured by the Cybermen, and we get a little bit more of those electricity shots as they start zapping his brain. And yeah, they don't quite line up very well, and also they don't seem to be affecting Toberman. I guess because he's electricity proof.
So there's like 2 shocks. The first shock completely misses and hits the other Cyberman on the head. And the other one comes close enough if Toberman just kept his head still. But yeah, so apparently, like, the camera focused on the spark generator had 18 seconds to move to their next shot, which is insanity. Just to imagine these cameramen just running around the place. I can't imagine doing that.
Stressful. It would be very stressful.
Oh yes, I'd be dead. Also, like, there's a lot of filming delays. You know, the cyber controller has a big thing on the set. That's supposed to be lit up, but the studio lights don't really show that it's lit up, but it still kept the effect anyway. And we had a battery up there, and they had to delay filming several times to recharge the battery, which is insanity for something that doesn't really show itself on screen that well.
Yeah, it's a big shame. With this scene with Toberman, though, they zap him twice in the head, which eventually knocks him down, and then the Cybermen go, wow, he's strong, we'll turn him into a Cyberman, which is the 4th time they've now said this. And we then cut to the rest of the party as they're escaping, climbing up the ladder. And Victoria says something very silly, as she is wont to do. She goes, "Oh my god, look at all that smoke." You were standing next to the guy as he grabbed the smoke grenades. Were you? And said that there's smoke in them. Why are you shocked at the smoke? You knew the plan. Like,
well, she didn't understand what smoke grenades were. Like, it's not as full as in the name or anything. Also, I guess she is from the Victorian era. I'm not sure if they were invented at that time. So
probably not, but you know, she seems to be pretty on board with the time traveling ship being on an alien planet and Cybermen.
True.
Like, why are smoke grenades stripping her up?
I guess that's a good point. My headcanon is that she's just impressed by this bomb. You know.
But we then see the Doctor running up for escaping as a Cyberman's right behind him, and as the Cyberman's climbing the ladder, much like our good friend Bok, you can just see the zip all down his back for his costume.
Also, underneath his armpit, the suit is ripped. I'm not sure if it's this Cyberman or another Cyberman later on. There's a big rip somewhere.
That's a big shame. I never noticed.
It might not be this one, but actually, no, it might not be this one. I think it is this one, yeah. If you look at just underneath the left armpit, there's like a big rip. And I think it gets bigger later on.
As he's climbing the ladder.
Yeah.
Oh, wow, yeah, there is a big rip in his costume there. We then get a pretty interesting scene that I kind of like. As the Doctor's climbing the ladder, the Cyberman grabs him by the leg, and it's like, oh no, the Doctor's getting grabbed by the Cyberman, we need to close the hatch as well, and what's going to happen? It builds tension pretty well, you know, we're cutting back to the hand on the lever as it's getting ready to pull it down, the Doctor's trying to escape, and then the way he escapes, I think, is very strange. So Victoria grabs a flask, and starts hitting the Cyberman with the flask, and the Cyberman goes, ow! And let's go with the Doctor.
Apparently in the script, she was supposed to, like, pour the contents of the flask down with Cyberman, which would make more sense, I guess, because machinery plus water isn't good. But yeah, it kind of doesn't lead anywhere. It's weird.
I wonder why they chose to just hit him instead. I guess it's to not ruin the costume.
Maybe it just took time to unscrew the flask and pour it down. I don't know. It's weird.
Nah, it makes a lot more sense than going bash on his metallic wrist and then he goes, ouchie! But then they close the hatch, and it gets a pretty cool shot of the Cyberman trying to hold up the hatch as it comes crushing down on top of him. I thought that was a pretty cool shot.
Yeah, it looks like it was also shot on film, and I really like the film shots in this episode. Looks great.
And then we get a scene that would genuinely be terrifying in the 60s. It's like pretty tension building now. When the hatch is closed, and then the Cyberman just starts punching the hatch, and you can see it starting to make dents in the hatch as it's coming through. It's like, this is terrifying. Like,
yeah, it looks almost as if it's like paper thin or something. Interesting. and of course, Victoria starts crying because she has nothing else to do in this story.
Yeah, it's a big shame. But she says a line. She's like, oh my god, it was so strong. It's like, you just annihilated that thing with the flask, Victoria. I think you're pretty strong. What are you on about? Like,
and also, yeah, she didn't make much contact with him, so she doesn't know how strong it really is. I guess the banging on the hatch, but still.
Yeah. And then they find out that Klieg, the bad guy, and Toberman are left behind, and they're like, oh well, let's go home. And then we see the Cyberman climbing down the ladder, and I've just paused it here, and I paused it on the perfect frame. That is a massive rip in his costume.
It got worse, yeah.
Yeah, that is a humongous rip.
Ouch. Poor Cyberman must be dead at this point.
We then see Klieg hiding... Let's try that word again. We then see Klieg hiding behind a pillar to escape one of the Cybermen, and then he turns around the pillar as the Cybermen come, and they're like, the human escaped, blah, 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 blah. And how many times in classic Doctor Who does somebody escape by hiding behind a pillar or behind a doorway? Because I feel like every episode of classic Who we've watched, it happens all the time.
Yes, I'm pretty sure it happens most episodes. It's a good way to add tension.
What I find interesting here, so Klieg starts knocking on the hatch, and people start questioning, which I thought was pretty clever, if it's the Cybermen knocking or not, because obviously we just saw the Cybermen punching the thing. But if you're Klieg, surely the better thing to do, instead of knocking, which is loud, is to go, "Hey guys, it's me. Come and help me."
Yeah, but A, no one would hear him, and also
What
B...
did they? I'm pretty sure it's if you can hear him knocking through it, he could probably shout once and go, "Hey!" And then they would open it because they would know it's not him.
But also B, the Cybermen were just told to guard the place, so he needs to get out of there very quickly.
I suppose. I still feel like shouting would get him out quicker, because right now they're having a discussion of, is he a Cyberman? I don't know if he's a Cyberman. Should we leave him to die?
That's a good point, yeah, sure. Either way, I don't care about his character. I hope he dies.
So they open the hatch, they let Klieg out, and then they close the hatch, and Jamie appears to be holding a giant cork. As if you see, as they're climbing up through the hatch, he's ready to hit the Cyberman with what looks like a giant cork.
I think it's a stool.
I think it is a stool. Where he got that from, I don't know, but I like to imagine it's a giant cork.
Well, dude, there are tables around and we're all sitting, so, it's from where?
From where, though?
The man is just sitting down, Eric. He just sat down.
How's he sitting down if Jamie has the cork?
On another stool, you dumbass. I do love how his reaction is to, I wish I was still in a stronger position to bargain with him. Like, he doesn't realize what kind of danger he's in.
Yeah, he still thinks that the Cybermen are, like, willing to talk and have a meeting about, like, logistics and figuring out, their business plan and coming to a deal. It's like, no, they just want to turn you into a Cyberman, dude. Like,
it does kind of remind me of, like, a certain American politician, in a way.
They decide to lock Klieg and the evil lady into the testing room because there's only one way in and one way out. And we discover that the rocket ship still isn't ready to fly away because the script needs it to be broken still. And we then go to the Cybermen, who are like, let's release the Cybermats. Why are they called Cybermats?
Because they kind of look like mats.
They don't. They look like mice.
I don't know.
They
also... Locking the two villains in the testing room with all the weapons is such a bad idea.
Yeah. The one working weapon that's that they have access to.
Why not keep them still in the room where they all are? That way we can keep an eye on them. Doesn't make any sense.
Also, is there a reason? So, I'm trying to think logically here. The spaceship is broken. It does not fly. They didn't want anybody to wait in the spaceship because they knew that one of the people broke the spaceship. But now they know that Klieg, the lady, and Toberman were the bad guys that broke the spaceship. Why doesn't everybody now go and wait in the spaceship until it is fixed?
Because then the story would end, my dude. like Klieg and the lady would just come out of the room with their gun and be like, where is everyone?
Yeah, why did they leave? Oh no, we're going to be killed by Cybermen now. As the rocket ship flies off in the distance. Problem solved. Like, that would solve everything. So that's a relatively large plot hole I never saw before.
Yeah, that's Doctor Who. You have to come up with a reason why everyone stays contained within this place. Or why they don't just go to the TARDIS,
Which they never gave a reason for. They just, like, the Doctor just didn't offer it to other people. He offered it to Jamie and Victoria because he was interested in looking at the Cybermen stuff. But the other people that are in danger, nah, they're not allowed to go to the TARDIS.
Like, even if they were like, oh, the Cybermen planned a trap and the TARDIS got sucked underground or something like that would be an interesting way of disposing of the TARDIS in this episode.
Yeah. It's... they weren't worried about it, so we shouldn't be. What were you going to say?
I was about to say, or Toberman could have, like, pushed a giant rock in front of a TARDIS or something like that.
Yeah, something. But we then see the Cybermen in a very long scene getting the Cybermats out. And they're like, we've got the Cybermats. We'll use cybernetics. We're the Cybermen. Cyber. They pick up the Cybermats, they put them down, and then they go, oh, they're not working. Pick them back up. Let's find out why they're not working. It's like a minute-long scene of them playing with kind of crap-looking toys. You know what it reminded me of? In primary school, did you ever have, I think it was like a ladybug that you could program, like, move forward, move right, move forward, and then it would, like, that's what the Cybermats look like. They look like those programmable things. But yeah, the scene is very silly.
It just looks like men just playing for toys, really.
Yeah, they're like trying to race their cars. They're like remote control cars. They're like, oh, it's not working. The batteries are dead. Let's try and get some new batteries.
There is something charming about it, though. I do like that.
Yeah, and then we see the bad guys using the cyber gun because they decided to lock them in the room with the gun. Why not lock them in one of the other rooms? Why the one with the gun? Like,
is there any other room in this place?
They were like exploring the big rejuvenation center. Sure,
okay.
There was nobody in there.
True.
You know? They could just trap them in the machine Victoria got locked in.
But yeah, what a surprise. The villains of the episode want to use a gun. I'm so shocked.
And then we go back to the Cybermen as they all have their Cybermats at the ready. And they're like, okay, get ready to race. Here we go. 3, 2, 1, put them down. And then they put them on the ground and they start moving. It's such a strange scene.
I almost expected the cyber leader to have like one of those pistol things and just be like, now! I just love seeing all the Cybermen crouched down playing with their little cars. It's great.
We then go back to Klieg, who's now got the cyber gun, and he turns around and test fires it, almost shooting his evil friend that's locked in with him, whose name I don't remember either. When he shoots the gun, though, it produces like a fireball, and it actually looks really good.
Well, actually, that was a mistake on set. That's the actual like end of the gun that's supposed to still be there, but it just fires off because of the impact.
Wow, it looked good, at least.
I think they wind up fixing it by next week's episode 4. But yeah, this gun is actually something that became real life, like 20 years later, apparently. It's like an X-ray laser, which uses ions, which create more powerful beams than ordinary lasers, and it wasn't created until the 80s. At this point, it was like cutting edge of science, so it's an interesting thing about having a science as a writer of the episode.
Yeah, they can create something that in the next few decades would be like, oh yeah, that does make sense, you know. We then get the scene with Klieg and Evil Person is pretty good. You know, Klieg has this weird moment where he's like, yes, I am the master. I'm the master. And it's like, are we doing a big twist reveal here? What's going on?
That's another case of just a character referring to himself as a master before a master is invented, which is weird. Happens a lot during the Troughton era.
Yeah, very, very strange. But we he decides like he's going to shoot the Doctor and his companions because they're the biggest risk or whatever, and it's a pretty well acted scene. It's the guy's doing a good job of being evil and not hamming it up too much, while still hamming it a little, so it's fun. And then we cut to one of the Cybermats in a close up, and it is the goofiest thing you could possibly cut to. Like if you were to like this one dramatic scene cut to the goofiest thing you possibly could, it would be this shot of the Cybermat with its giant bulging eyes and weird like spiky mustache that it's got.
It's cute. I think it looks kind of cute in a way.
It looks like it's in constant pain.
The eyes look kind of bloodshot, don't they? Also, another question I have, is the beeping of the Cybermats audible to the people inside of this episode, or is it just audible for the audience? Because nobody ever seems to pick up the beeping of the Cybermats.
Yeah, they didn't pick it up when Evil Lady got hit by it. last week as well. Like it was, so I guess it's just for the audience to see, which I'm not the biggest fan of. I like my sound to be in the scene rather than just added for effect. So I guess, or it's at a frequency where just nobody else can hear it but the audience.
It's only a frequency that only Cybermen can hear, and we are the Cybermen.
So they put the Cybermats on like a little runway to go and get to the people, and they've put the first one down and its wee tail's wagging, and then they put the second one down, but they put the second one down slightly too close to the first one, and it like latches onto the tail, and you can see them like struggling. The two Cybermats are struggling to move and wiggle their tails because they're now attached to one another, and it's the Cybermats are hysterically funny.
They really are. And I just love seeing the big Cybermen just play with them like toys. It's so funny. But yeah, we cut to characters sleeping in the most uncomfortable ways possible. Like, one of the characters are sleeping on stairs.
Yeah, and the doctor's hugging a tube. Also, this is one of the few times we see the doctor sleep. I remember picking up on that, being like, we never see the doctor sleep, ever. And it's strange that we're watching him sleep now.
I'm trying to think of any other time, but we don't see much people sleep, to be fair. There's no characters in bed ever, apart from like Rose.
Yeah, I remember I think it's a Capaldi episode, they're like, when do you sleep? And he goes, when people aren't looking. Like...
To be fair, Capaldi did a lot of sleeping in his first episode.
That's true, yeah, we only usually see the Doctor sleeping when they regenerate. We never see them like just sleeping afterwards.
But to be fair, an episode that has a Doctor sleeping would be pretty boring. Just if we saw him sleeping all the time. It'd be a bit weird.
Unless it was a specific, like, dream monster.
But yeah, this scene was included last minute in the script just to remind viewers of what happened to Victoria's dad the summer before, to just recap what happened to her before. And
See,
I think
it's my favorite scene in the episode.
It's one of my favorite scenes in all of Doctor Who, to be honest. It's just really good.
This scene is the reason why this is my favorite episode. Because besides this scene, this episode's full of filler. It's full of nonsense and filler and nothing happens. But I really like this one scene where Troughton is like talking through like grief and family and things like that. And it's really, really touching and heartwarming, and is the scene that I played as the cold open for this episode. So that's what we're talking about.
Oh yes, dude, I heard that, yes. But yeah, it's probably one of my favorite scenes in Doctor Who history, because as someone whose dad died, this is just impactful to me. It's like the Doctor is speaking directly to me, so it just means that so much more to me, because I watched this soon after my dad died, and just the emotions were strong in this one, to be honest.
Yeah, it's really, really well put together, and one of the best, like, I think Troughton, in the brief few episodes I've been with him, is incredibly strong as the Doctor, but this scene particularly, he's acting his ass off. Like, and even Victoria is really good in this. Like, it's like the one scene where she's not screaming and she's just there having an actual human conversation with the Doctor, and it plays really, really well.
I do like how the Doctor in this episode is like, he's socially inept sometimes, but at the same time, he's able to have this real deep conversations. But cut forward like 50 years when the Doctor is talking to Graham about his cancer, and she's like, "Oh, I'm too awkward for this conversation.
I can't have this conversation. I'm just gonna leave you with your sadness." But it's just straight up one of the worst moments Jodie has ever had as the Doctor. Like, it was dreadful.
It really was. And if you could have like a speech that hits this kind of impact, it's just 1 minute you just need to write. Just have this sort of impact on anyone like anyone in the audience who's having cancer. They could just relate to that scene and just feel the feels.
See, I think that's perhaps one of the issues I have with Jodie's seasons that we've never really had in Doctor Who before. It really feels like, with Jodie's Doctor particularly, they're terrified to slow the episode down.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they will not slow the episode down and just have people talk. Like, just have a delicate, quiet conversation with the Doctor and someone else. It's always like, oh, we've got to be big and loud. And this was what was popular when David Tennant was around, right? Like, it's got to be this big adventure with things. And whenever there is a quiet moment, like, they always undermine themselves and do something stupid with it.
Yeah, there was that episode where they're on a spaceship and there's a little gremlin kind of tearing apart the spaceship. I think it's called the Ting. I can't remember what the actual episode is called. There's a moment in that episode where Yaz and Ryan have a conversation, and it's quite good. They have a conversation about Ryan's absent father, but it's undermined because at that same time there's like a countdown to when the spaceship will explode, and it's like, you're just... You can't have your quiet time now when there's danger just around the corner.
Yeah, and I think that's, one of the reasons why nobody connected with the companions and why no one's really connected with Jodie's Doctor, because they haven't had that moment where they're like, oh, you're a person. You're not just like a collection of actors doing a scene. You're the person. I believe your character.
I disagree with that to an extent, because I just did a rewatch of Series 11, and particularly Graham has a lot of great moments where he's grieving over Grace. And there's that episode where he has the chance to stay with this, like, there's like a universe that has its own consciousness, and it creates Grace out of nowhere. And Graham has a decision whether or not to stay with this version of Grace that's fake. And his decision to leave this Grace is very impactful, and it's probably one of the greatest moments of the Jodie era.
Yeah,
it's a good episode, honestly.
Graham was the fan favorite for a reason, because he out of everybody had more stuff to do. But like Ryan, he can ride a bike, not really anymore. Still,
there is that episode where his dad comes back, which I don't think you've seen. It's the New Year's Day special. You're in the hospital. It's the Dalek episode.
Resolution. Yeah.
I just watched that again recently. It's one of the best Dalek stories in years. There is some good stuff in the Jodie era.
Oh yeah, it's not all terrible, but I think comparatively, it's very much on the lower end.
Yeah, there's an imbalance, I would say.
But this scene with the Doctor is great.
Oh yes.
And there's particularly a moment which we touched on last week a little bit, where Victoria's like, I bet you're so old you don't remember your family, and the Doctor's like, I can remember my family when I want to remember them. It's like, I when I want to think about them, I'll think about them, and then they go to the back of my mind, but they're still always there. And it's that lovely touch of like establishing who the Doctor is and that he has this family. We know he's got a granddaughter. We know he's technically got a daughter that's hopping around space-time at the moment, but we don't talk about her because she exploded on the moon, I think is what they said.
Yeah, that's what Stephen Moffat said. Yeah,
she immediately crashed her ship and died. But yeah, like the Doctor has this whole family history, and in the 50th anniversary, there's the theory that the old lady he meets on Gallifrey's his mum.
I think that's actually the end of time, which is Russell's last episode. Yeah. Where it's like that's his mum, and it's like establishing these things with the Doctor where he's lived this whole life and things like that makes the Doctor compelling to me. That's where I'm like, oh, I want to know more about you, and you're this like whole person with this whole life. Making the Doctor the timeless child isn't compelling to me. Yeah, I'd rather, if they want to expand the lore, I'd rather find out about his family, which is a big cheat in itself. I don't want them to explore his family, but if you want to explore further with the Doctor,
there's so many stuff you could do with it, because like, clearly his family means a lot to him, and he was traveling with his granddaughter, but what happened to the rest of his family? Why did he decide to leave them? Why did he abandon them? Just because he wanted the adventure? I don't think that's quite right. Because why would he take his granddaughter with them? What happened to make that leave?
Yeah. I like how everything turns back to a timeless child. Well,
it's just so big. It's just such a big change in the lore. Like,
this is the second time we've mentioned the timeless child in under an hour.
It's one of those changes in the lore of Doctor Who that changes everything, and so you have to question every aspect of it.
100%. But also, I'm reading a little bit of Victoria treating the Doctor like her dad, and the Doctor treating Victoria like his daughter in there as well, because there's a point where Victoria lets the Doctor sleep instead of waking up because she feels something for him, it's like a paternal figure to her.
Yeah, it's very sweet, and if you're thinking about it, Victoria is there to be the Doctor's daughter because she's to replace Susan, as every female companion is.
That's kind of disturbing when you think about Rose.
Yeah, there's a reason why a lot of people weren't super comfortable with that story.
I don't think that quite fits, but sure.
The whole Rose thing. I like Rose mainly because that's the companion I grew up with. I like the story with her and Tennant, and I buy into it. But if you do take a step back, it is weird. It is.
Yes,
it's a weird combo.
It's the same thing with Buffy, like a 16-year-old, a 200-odd-year-old vampire in love with a 16-year-old. It does raise some questions.
Yeah, you get the same with like Twilight and things. Like, why is this guy still going to high school with Vito? And then I guess we get a time jump when Victoria goes down to sleep, and then we cut to the Cybermat crawling on the floor. And the Doctor spots it, and then he tells everyone to wake up because Victoria's very oh God, what's going on? What? Unless she's as soon as she closes her eyes, is out. She just clonks out.
We actually get a little glimpse of the Doctor putting Victoria to sleep. She's closing her eyes, and the Doctor goes over to a chair, and he doesn't seem to be moving position when the Cybermat hits his leg. So it's very weird. Yeah. Also, he has a gun.
He does. The Doctor's got a gun again.
Can we call up the episode title again?
The Doctor's got a gun again. Although he puts it down immediately. He never actually shoots it, as far as I remember.
This one's a tiny gun, though.
Mm-hmm.
Also, this is where we get back to some film footage rather than videotape, and I think these shots look really good, particularly the close-ups of the Cybermats. I think they look great. In kind of like a B horror movie kind of vibe.
Yeah, they're very fun, and the Doctor says something that very much resonated with me whenever there's a spider in the room, where he's like, okay, everybody get out and go into the other room, we'll lock ourselves in there.
But yeah, this Callum dude just falls asleep. He's still sleeping with Cybermat's on his face, I think.
It's doesn't crawling up his body, yeah.
He doesn't feel it or hear it beep. He's just still sleeping. And the Doctor has to slap it away.
Yeah, see, I think my issue here with this scene, so he gets everybody up, and then they're all panicking, we need to go to the other room, we need to go over here, blah, what's going on? Is the Cybermats are not an intimidating presence, and you can step over them.
Yeah.
You
could just literally crush them with your boots.
You could kick it. You could just kick it, yeah. And we've established they're not heavy. You could just pick it up by its head and throw it. It's I think this scene has got a big lack in tension.
And also, there's only 4 of them that's moving at the time. There's 7 props actually, but 3 of them aren't real; they're just dummies. And the other 4 are just remote controlled. So you could easily get rid of 7 Cybermats. And Victoria screams again.
Yeah. But, one of the soldiers grabs a gun and starts shooting one of the Cybermats, and he puts 3 shots into it, which kills it, and then the Doctor's like, there's too many, you're wasting bullets, get back. I was like, I don't know, that seemed pretty effective to me. There's not that many of them. Mm-hmm. But the Doctor covers wire around everybody, he creates a border and then creates an electric field that the Cybermats can't get over, which I guess works, but isn't the solution I would go for. I would just go back to the rocket ship and wait. But
I would just get one of those massive stools that Jamie was holding earlier and just crush them.
Yeah. That would work. Also, the wire starts creating smoke to represent the electric field. There is so much smoke in this episode. Every effect has got smoke attached to it somehow.
And also, the Doctor was just hugging this wire not even 10 minutes ago.
Okay, so the Doctor kills all the Cybermats by creating an electric field, and he's got a pretty funny line where he's like, you could say that their tiny little metal minds had a complete mental breakdown, and then Jamie goes, ooh, that's a bit far. I'm like, what? Why what's causing you to have that reaction, Jamie?
I love it. I love it, Phil. Just Jamie appreciating the pun. It's great.
And then as they're leaving, we pan up to Klieg, who's got the gun. He's about to shoot the Doctor. But is it just me, or does the film or the tape look really warped here?
Yeah.
It's like all wavy and weird looking.
Yeah, you notice it when the camera pans up, and that's obviously a distortion of the film, of the original negatives or whatever. But the restoration team, obviously it must have been so much worse than what it is presented as here. And the restoration team as a whole...
It's in crazy high quality. And then Klieg brings up his gun and fires it as we hear, "Watch out, Doctor!" And that's the cliffhanger for this episode. What do you think about this episode, watching it back again?
It's really good. It's I think it's like the best paced episode so far of the 3 episodes we've seen.
Interesting. So this was my favorite episode in the story, and I still think it kind of is. I really like the scene with the Doctor and Victoria. That scene is the best scene in this entire story. But I think this episode, going back to it, has so much filler and padding out of time to it and repetition that it definitely feels like the middle episode in the story. Like, from my experience in Classic Who, there's always the one episode that's like, we just needed to put an episode in here. And I would say that this episode's probably that one, considering how much story happens in the first 2 parts and how little story happens in this part. Like, what happens in this episode? They escape the Cybermen, and then they have a nap. That's the
fair.
episode. But I still really, really did enjoy this episode.
I don't think any part of Tomb of the Cybermen is bad in any way, so it's a good story overall.
Yeah, I think considering how some of the Classic Who episodes are paced, this story specifically is like a breeze. Like, it's paced pretty consistently throughout every episode. It's just that when you break each episode down into like, okay, what happened here? You can find the one that was filler. But considering like some episodes with like 5-6 stories, it's like, okay, there's like 90% of this is filler. Like, I definitely think this is on the upper echelon of Classic Who that I've experienced so far.
Yeah, but I think this would be so much worse if it was 6 parts, like a lot of other Doctor Who was.
Yeah, there is not enough story. There's like enough story here for 4 parts. Mate, you could probably do 3 parts. Like, I think you could get 3 parts out of this story. It doesn't need to be 4, but 4 is like the max you could push. But with that, we shall move straight in to the finale of the Tomb of the Cybermen.
Ah, yes, as you say, such a combination between intelligence and power would make you formidable indeed. Why, you'd be commander of the universe with your brilliance. It makes the imagination reel with the possibilities.
Why, Doctor, if I'd only known you shared my imagination, you might even have worked for me.
Perhaps it's not too late.
Doctor!
Oh, Jamie, don't you see? Don't you see what this is going to mean to all the people who come to serve Klieg, the all-powerful? Why, no country, no person would dare to have a single thought that was not your own. Eric Klieg's own conception of the way of life.
Brilliant. Yes. Yes, you're right. Master of the world.
Well, now I know you're mad. I just wanted to make sure.
I don't remember almost anything that's happens in this episode, by the way. I don't know why. I remember episode 3 really well. But this episode particularly, I just barely remember.
Yeah, it's a bit of an odd final episode, because they kind of have to go back downstairs, even though we could just leave at this point.
Yeah, I think they really worked themselves into a corner with, like, why don't they leave? Like... Yeah.
And I think the opening of this episode undercuts the interesting cliffhanger from last episode, because it immediately shows that he wasn't even aiming for the Doctor.
Yeah, but that's what I love about the cliffhangers, is they're always not actually cliffhangers. they're like lies that the camera tells you.
Yeah, because episode 1 ended on like the test Cyberman coming out and being like, oh, it isn't a real threat, it's okay.
Yeah, but we see that the man that shouted, "Watch out, Doctor!" was the guy that got shot after all, and he like gets shot in the shoulder and then does like a full 360 twirl before dropping to the ground.
And also boom mic shadows Jamie completely.
Where?
Just
give me a time code.
When Eric is getting the gun, just after that shot.
Hang on. Oh my god, yes it does. It goes right over his face. Just, all I can see, have you ever seen the film Bolt?
The one with Miley Cyrus and John Travolta?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's the director who's like, boom mic!
Like, I haven't seen that movie in so long.
I remember a clip of that one specific part right here.
I remember it being better than it had any right to be.
Boom mic!
We got a boom mic.
It's a boom mic.
It's one of those films where I definitely enjoyed it the first time I watched it, but my little brother became obsessed with it, and so it was on all the time, and so like I grew to despise the film because I had been forced to watch it so many times.
That does remind me of G-Force that came out the same time, the movie with the spy hamsters.
Yeah, I saw that in cinema. That's one of my earliest memories of being in the cinema. I remember I saw that in 3D, and the 3D was terrible, except for one bit where a fly flies out of the screen and goes around your eyes, and I was like, oh, that was cool 3D. But the rest of it was terrible.
I remember the video game, that was shit. No surprise.
I think we had the video game on DS, and I don't think I ever played it because I just liked playing Pokemon.
I had it on Wii and played it for like half an hour. I was like, this is shit, and I put it down. Never played it again. But yeah, back to Doctor Who.
Yeah, they start having a discussion about how Evil Man never killed the guy that he shot. And a scene that I think is a line that I think is quite funny, where it's like, you missed, you didn't kill him, and then Klieg's like, I could have done it if I wanted to, I just didn't want to kill him. I can aim the gun, I swear. Like, it gets very defensive about it. What I like here as well is Evil Lady starts talking, whose name I don't remember.
Neither do I.
Yeah, she just starts talking, and she's like, the Cybermen will make good use of you people, and I like the delusion that both the villains have at the moment, that the Cybermen are on their side.
Yeah,
like,
so do
they
I.
They have no reason to believe that the Cybermen are on their side, other than they think that of course they're going to be, because look, we have the gun now, we're in charge. But it's like, they do not understand who the Cybermen are, and I think it's a really cool, like, comeuppance that can happen with the villains.
I mean, there's an awkward moment where Eric is shouting for the controller. He's like, I wish to speak to the controller, but he has to repeat it twice, almost as if the Cybermen miss their cues.
The joys of this slightly awkward blocking and having to do things in one take. But it plays into two things, because there's two heads you can have with it. You can be like, yeah, they missed their cue there, and that's really awkward. Or it's more realistic because they didn't hear him the first time. It's either or.
But we do cut to the Cyberman just standing around, not doing anything. We're just standing and doing nothing. And also you can see...
They're not even looking at each other. They're just standing in spot, ignoring him as he's shouting down.
Also, I think you can see in this episode, the cyber controller isn't lit up anymore. The brain is just completely off at this point.
Yeah.
We gave up on that effect.
Which is fair, because you could not tell in the other episodes.
You can tell slightly if you look close enough, but here it's just obviously off. But yeah, the Cybermen go for a lovely nap. Again.
Yeah, but we see that they made Klieg into a Cyberman, and I thought it was so underwhelming, the way that
you
they
mean
turned
Toberman?
Toberman, yeah, they turned Toberman into a Cyberman, and I thought it was so underwhelming how they did it, where it's like, we're going to make you like us, you're going to be a Cyberman, we're going to give you one robot arm. Yeah,
but to convert him fully would take a lot more time. We don't have that time, do we?
But they're wanting to convert everybody. And they're going to be doing it, as they established, one at a time. So why not just get a head start and do it? But yeah, then they all go back into their pods for no reason.
And also, if you notice, this is reused footage from episode 2. It's just played backwards.
Played backwards, yep. What I like is, which we see, I don't remember if we see it in this scene or if it's one later on when they get frozen again. The scene where they're ripping out, they play that again, but backwards. So the thing like mends itself. It's like, oh, that looks very silly. So yeah, why do they go back into their pods? Did they say? I do not get why they would do that.
I guess we're losing strength or something. I guess we need more strength and we need to just hibernate more. Yes, you will re-enter cells to conserve energy. I guess we just need to sleep off to kill all the humans to convert them later on. It's
sure. It's a reason to get rid of all the Cybermen there, I guess. It's a way of leveling the playing field for the heroes a bit more. But yeah, it's a very silly reason.
And I think it does make it more interesting when there's a lone Cyberman and he has a gun pointed against him, and I think that's an interesting concept.
Yeah, like the lone Cyberman is a way more intimidating than it's a lot like the Daleks. When you have one villain, it's way more scary as to what that thing can do than when you have an army of them. The tension, I don't know why, but the tension just goes when there's so many of them. Yeah.
Because if you see, like, I don't know, like 15 Cybermen being destroyed, if they look weaker somehow. Yeah. Whereas if you see one Cyberman being destroyed, it's like, oh, fair enough, it's just one Cyberman.
Yeah, you see, or you've got like an army of Cybermen fighting an army of people, and then you see like 15 or so Cybermen get killed. You're like, oh, okay, I get it. But if you see one Cyberman going up against 15 people, and that Cyberman's unstoppable, it's way more terrifying.
Like for me, the Daleks have been severely undermined recently because they appear every single year, and every single time they pop up, it's like, oh, another Dalek story. Oh, okay then. Whereas if the Dalek stories were more spread out, it would feel like we haven't been defeated in a while, therefore more of a threat.
Yeah, I find it. I think with the Daleks specifically, Russell T Davies, the man himself, plays a lot into them being not scary. The first time he brought them back with Dalek, incredible episode, and then every time he brought them back after that, it sucked.
I would say the Parting of the Ways is the best for Daleks I've ever been. Especially those scenes where you could hear the Daleks from upstairs and you know they're coming downstairs. Mm-hmm. It's so good.
Yeah, yeah.
I think there's a contract with Terry Nation's estate, the creator of the Daleks, where they have to reuse the Daleks every single year, or otherwise they'll lose the rights to the character. I'm not sure how true that is, but it does explain a lot.
It does explain a lot, yeah. And, I don't mind them coming back if they can find creative ways to do it. It's just, like, every time they bring them back, there's an army of them. There's an army of them. There's an army of them. And it gets boring. We then, evil man Klieg, I think his name is. Klieg. I've been saying it fine this whole time, and now I've forgotten.
Klieg.
Klieg. He gets, he's now, like, in control of the Cyberman, essentially, because he's putting a gun to it, and he gets the Cyberman to release Toberman from its control, and we get a digital effect that actually lines up.
Yes.
And I'm like, oh wow, it doesn't look great because it's digital effect from the 60s, but it lines up, which is something to be applauded and praised.
Also, the woman is like, oh, Toberman, it's good you're back, as he's walking down the stairs very robotically and not showing any emotions.
Yeah, and he's got a cloak on where one arm's longer than the other for no reason. Of course, he's not hiding anything under that long sleeve. But what I like is the Doctor and Jamie catch on to it, where Jamie's like, Doctor, he seems a bit, and the Doctor's like, yeah, he does, doesn't he? Where they're like, they're not idiots, but the villains are idiots. Like,
yeah. So the Cyberman is all like, oh, I need to be revitalized, and Klieg accepts the offer to let him be revitalized, and you can see the cyber leader is way too big for those doors.
What do you think about the Cybermen needing to recharge themselves? I think it totally undermines their intimidation factor.
I think it kind of works because they're still early in their Cyberman days, and we just need to. They're still figuring out the technology and how their bodies operate. And I understand where your viewpoint comes from, Phil. It reminds me of the Daleks in episode 1 of the classic series, where they need to constantly be on this metal flooring to operate, and they're easily defeated by blankets. That's kind of where we're going off here.
I love that episode where you can like push a Dalek over and like ride them like they're like trolleys. Like,
but yeah, I see it sort of being as some vaguely the same premise here. But of course, Victoria is held hostage by Klieg as the Doctor and Jamie go with the Cyberman.
Yeah, because she's the damsel in distress, and then the Cyberman climbs into the rejuvenation center and is talking about, like, we will survive. And, you know, it's fine, and everyone's questioning why the Doctor's going to help the Cyberman, and we find out it's because the Doctor's like, well, I'm going to trap it in the coffin that we saw Victoria get trapped in earlier, which, you know, is actually a pretty good setup and payoff, I think. Like, we understand what the rejuvenation center is like and how it works with that door closing in, so we've had that established already, and now we get it repeated again with the Cyberman to kill the villain. But the staging for the first time it happened was so dumb. Like, so...
And also there's a nice little unscripted moment where the Doctor hits Jamie on the head as he says, he's too weak to get in. But yeah, it's interesting how they trust us to remember what happened 4 weeks ago, like almost a month ago, just what happened to Victoria. But also, locking it inside of a chamber where it gets stronger is such a bad idea, I thought.
Yeah. It depends on if there's a limit. So, like, if it's like charging your battery, when it gets to 100%, it just stops, or if it'll just keep going, and then you've created a super Cyberman. Like... but after they lock or try to figure out how to lock the Cyberman in once the door closes, we cut back to Victoria and the villains. And Victoria in this scene is smart, but it also establishes our villains to be even stupider than we already thought they were. When Victoria convinces them that there's a gun in the rejuvenation room, and they're like, "Oh God, is there? Is there a gun? We have to go in and see if there's a gun in there." It's like, how you were in the room, like.
Yeah, it's very awkward how the villains are, because they come across as very stupid. Just not noticing Toberman's a Cyberman or anything like that.
They're supposed to be these like logic geniuses, like.
Actually, I don't know.
The evil guy Klieg is from like a cult of logicians.
Yeah.
Like their whole he solved all the puzzles with the Doctor's help, but he's supposed to be at least somewhat smart.
And I think the woman. I'm not sure how intelligent the woman is. I think she just paid for this expedition or whatever. So I understand her not being as intelligent.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it just comes across as just rather silly.
And then they turn off the machine that's charging up the Cyberman as we cut back to the Doctor. And the Doctor's like, "Oh, Jamie, I hope you've locked down that door really well." And he's like, "Oh, yeah, it's locked down so well. No one's getting out of there." And then they all forgot that the door of the coffin was made out of tinfoil, as the Cyberman punches his way out in a pretty cool showcase of strength, but it is the thinnest piece of tinfoil that he pushes his way through.
And then the Doctor says one of the funniest lines in the episode, I thought. He says, "Jamie, remind me to teach you how to tie knots."
Yeah, it's a great lesson. It's a great lesson. It's a great line. I'm sure it's a great lesson. I'm sure he'd teach that class really well.
But yeah, it's very obviously cardboard.
And then we see the Cyberman take back control of Toberman through the wall using their psychic connection thing that they established earlier. Which were like, oh no, now he's going to act like a robot, even though he already was acting like a robot. But now he's a bad guy, even though he was already a bad guy. But
I just can't believe Toberman attacked his master like that. I am so shocked that this happened.
He hits him with a big karate chop and all.
Yes.
Kya! As he brings his arm crashing down onto his skull. But before that happens, there's a fun little scene where one of their captives, they've got one of the pilots, is like, "What are you trying to get out of this?" And Klieg's like, "We're not going to tell you, dumbass." And then the lady's like, "Oh, but we might as well tell him." And like, you expect it to go into the villain monologue. And then like Klieg goes like, "Well, we want to build like a better world," or like something generic like that. And then Toberman comes over and just kills him, like, which I quite liked. You know, it's like we don't need to know the boring plan that the villains have.
Yeah.
We just know that they're trying to do something bad. Like,
Although we do get to know later on, which is
Yeah.
a very interesting scene later on. I like that scene.
and then when this scene comes through with the Cyberman and that they all burst through into the room and the Cyberman's congratulating Toberman for doing well, etc. But the soundtrack, the song starts playing here for the episode. I can't even mimic it. It's a weird soundtrack. I kind of like it under this scene though, because it's weird because it's not a very tension building sound. It's kind of goofy sounding, but like it's the song that played when the Cybermen were coming out of their cages or
Yes.
their pods, but it still fits the scene really well and somehow adds tension to it.
Yeah, I really like the music. It's very alien and very mysterious. Maybe it's a little too loud because you can't hear the villain lady very well, but sure, it's fine. Oh my god, he is massive compared to her, Phil, the Cyberman.
Oh yeah.
There's like a shot where she's refusing to take orders and she's backing up when the camera zooms out to reveal it. He's like twice the size of her. He's massive.
But this scene's so dumb. I think this scene's so dumb. So yeah, he's like intimidatingly tall, but he's like, okay, you need to open this hatch right now. And she's like, no, I will not. And he's like, oh god damn it. And then he opens the hatch and turns around, and then she's like, ha 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 ha, and closes the hatch again. And then the hatch closes. The Cyberman turns around, and she's like, I'm going to shoot you with my gun. Bang bang. Does nothing, and then the Cyberman shoots her, and she dies. It's like,
It is stupid.
Like.
Well, at least she gets somewhat of a chance to redeem herself in a way.
Yeah, also, she has like a smoke bomb in her shirt when she gets killed,
Yes.
and that must have sucked. That must have been so hard to breathe. Like,
Apparently, she fell asleep on set as well after this. like we were continuing filming, and all of a sudden we heard her snoring. We were like, "Wait, what's that sound? What's going on?" And we sort of turned around and just saw her sleeping there on the ground because
I mean, she's got nothing else to do, does she? She's dead now.
I think her kids were sick, and she didn't get much sleep the night before, and obviously those studios are very hot, as we know from experience from
Yeah.
college. They get very hot very fast, and she had nothing else to do in that scene, so might as well just sleep.
Yeah, and then the doctor breaks Toberman's mental conditioning so easily. Like, there's no struggle with it.
Yeah, it does portray Toberman as not being very intelligent in the first place. Which,
You know, it reminds me of the Peter Davidson episode we covered with the man that's been
Yes.
conditioned by the Daleks, and we see him throughout the episode struggling to come to terms and trying to break his conditioning, and then it's like it's actually established. Whereas here it's like, you don't want to do this, Toberman, and he's like, oh yeah, you're right. Like,
yeah, it certainly leaves a lot to be desired in his character, but at least he comes out as a hero in the end, which we'll get to.
and he absolutely nukes the Cyberman in the head. And then, in a repeat of what happened with him, we see him holding the Cyberman above his head. But the interesting thing about it is it's a classic cowboy switch, as the film term is officially known as, where he hits the Cyberman falls out of frame, and then we see Toberman walk out of frame, come back into frame with the Cyberman above his head, but he's clearly holding a dummy.
Yeah, it's done in one take, and he very clearly steps behind the camera and just picks up a dummy. It's great.
Especially when he throws it against with the console, and you see the Cyberman's body go, ah. Like it's like you'd see it in like a comedy film.
Like, I'm
it
sorry,
is-
they couldn't shove some like pillows in there to make it look thicker and more like.
it's so thin. It's such a skinny guy. Yeah.
And then magically in the next shot, it's another person again.
How did it do it? How did?
It is cute. I do like it. Because I doubt kids would notice that in the 1960s.
Oh,
the
yeah,
TVs,
yeah.
The TVs would be like, what,
So
6
low
inches?
res, yeah, so low res, so small, so far away. Your imagination does most of the work.
Like, this is only meant to be viewed once. Now, imagine kids remembered it being much bigger than it was.
And then another Cyberman starts coming out the hatch, and Jamie, for some reason, now has the gun. And it's like, look, get the Cyberman. So Jamie shoots it, and then we see a pretty cool shot of the close-up of the Cyberman as smoke starts pouring out of its mouth. I thought that was a pretty fun shot, and then it falls down the hatch, and then very theatrically, like if you were watching this in theater, Jamie runs up to the tube, and then he's like, "There's another one down there," and then he starts shooting down the tube, but of course we don't see down the tube because there's nothing down there. Like it reminded me a lot of like if you were watching this on like in theater, this is what they would do. Like,
I mean, this is literally theater. It's just made live, like no second takes. It's just one take, and it's all one set, one take, and this is literally watching a stage play, honestly. And then Jamie does a very stupid thing of putting the gun down.
And then the Doctor goes over to Toberman, and he's continuing to break down his mental conditioning, I guess, or he's like, "Don't you see what they were doing to you? They were trying to turn you into a slave," which made me go, "Whew, okay, that's but you know, it's fine, whatever. He's getting turned into a Cyberman, and then it's the only thing I don't like about this is how dumb Toberman is.
Yeah.
You know, he's like, "Oh, yeah, destroyed." And it's like, "Oh, this is bad. This is a weird thing." But in this scene, we also see that Klieg is pretending to be dead. He's still alive.
Yeah, which is the same thing his woman friend did like 2 seconds ago.
Yeah.
And of course, he grabs hold of a gun. That's fun. But yeah, I don't like how Toberman just becomes like a caveman either. It's not the best portrayal of a black man, I would just say.
Yeah, Toberman goes climbing down into the tube for some. Why don't they just close the hatch?
I know.
Why do they need to go in there? It makes no sense. But Toberman goes into the tube where all the Cybermen are, and then Klieg grabs the gun and then also goes towards the Cybermen, which makes no sense. Why not kill everybody and take the ship? But whatever. This is what's happening now. If I'm the Doctor in this situation, I close the hatch and I leave Toberman and Klieg down there with the Cybermen.
Yes. But yeah, Klieg wants to be the new controller because the controller died, which is fair. And then you see somebody behind Klieg, which when I was watching this, I was like, "Oh no, there's a stage hand behind Klieg for some reason. Oh no!" But when it turns out to be Jamie and the Doctor's hand signaling to him.
Yeah, it's a clever wee bit of staging there. For once in this episode, they got their blocking kind of cool. I really, really like this scene. So this is where Klieg is like monologuing about how he's going to be evil and he's going to be in charge and stuff like that. And then he spots Jamie, etc., and he brings them all into the group. And then one of my favorite Doctor moments possibly ever, I really enjoyed it, where the Doctor's talking and he's like, "Oh yeah, if you're in charge, you'll have control of the universe. It'll be brilliant. You'll have all this power." And the Klieg's like, yes, it will be. I'm glad you agree with me. And the Doctor's like, "No, I don't. I just wanted to make sure you were insane." It's such a good scene.
I see this as a scene where the Doctor's like, if he has some sort of reasonable logic behind him wanting the Cyberman in his control, then I will let him live. But if he's just a madman, I don't care either way if he lives or dies. I see that as a Doctor saying that.
It's such a good performance from Troughton, though, where he's like maniacally raving about how great this plan is. Like,
I do love how Jamie is like, "Oh, Doctor, you can't mean it." Also, it's obviously a ploy to waste time just so the Cybermen can wake up and kill him. If I was to do this episode, I would just insert like shots of the Doctor just looking at his watch, looking to see how long the Cybermen are actually taking, because they take ages to wake up. They
do take ages to wake up. But at least that was established in episode 2. You know, it takes like half an episode for them to wake up.
Like the next time we cut to the Doctor, he's just holding up a newspaper, just casually looking up from the newspaper, just wondering, "Oh, the Cybermen are still waking up. Okay, back to the news."
Then the captain we cut back to Victoria and that, who are waiting And the captain of the spaceship comes back, and he's like, "The ship's ready to go. Where is everybody?" Which, why didn't they just leave? Why didn't they just wait? And they're like, "Oh, they're down there with the Cyberman," and he's like, "Oh God, I hope they know what they're doing." And then Victoria is so sassy to him, where she's like, "Well, with your strength, I'm sure that if they need it, they'll come and get you for help. You're so strong." It's like, okay, where's this coming from, Victoria? Be more like this. This is great.
Well, she has been sexually harassed for well, not sexually harassed, but she's had sexist comments aimed towards her for over an hour now. So fair enough on Victoria to get a bit antsy.
Yeah, I'm glad she was. I just wish she was more like that.
Yeah. So Klieg is still rambling on, and there's a moment where the doctor's like, "All right, just kill us," and Klieg pulls up his gun, and then he changes his mind, which is. Obviously, the Doctor knows, but the Doctor is calling his bluff there, and I like that about the Doctor. The Doctor knows people.
Yeah, it's very good, and this episode specifically, I think the first half's maybe a bit slow, but this second half, when it just gets into monologues, and then Patrick Troughton just doing great, it's very, very good. It's very, very fun. I very much enjoy this second half of this episode.
And then I'm so shocked the Cybermen attack Klieg. Oh my God.
Who would have saw it coming? He had his back to the Cybermen this whole time.
And the Doctor just watches as Klieg is beaten to death, I guess.
Yeah, he lets Klieg get just absolutely destroyed by a Cyberman. And then he sends Toberman on the Cybermen. They start fighting one another, and then him and Jamie run over to the console and start doing logic puzzle things. Toberman and the Cybermen end up having a very awkward little scuffle with each other, which classic Doctor Who, I guess, where the choreography is just non-existent.
Yes. And
then we get a bit with the fight with Toberman that's actually kind of gruesome, where he punches the chest of the Cyberman, and it's accordion, as you so elegantly put it, bursts open, and then just goo starts pouring out of it, and it's really gross. And it reminds me in the David Tennant episode with the Cybermen where they first come back, when he opens the chest plate off them, and you just see all this green gooey organy gunk, and it's disgusting. And this really reminded me of that.
So this Cyberman being cut open got so much complaints back in 1967 because it was deemed way too violent, and the writer of the episode, Kit Pedler, had to defend himself on national television, being like, "It's okay." They even had to get a doctor in to say, "Children like to be scared. It's okay."
Which is that's very funny, especially because it's very clearly shaving foam.
Yes. But because of the controversy about this episode, only 4 countries bought the story: Australia, Hong Kong, Singapore, and New Zealand. And Australia gave it an adults only rating because of the violence, which is insane. Apparently the reason was it had no regard on human life or robot life.
Interesting to see where Australia stands for AI rights. We'll see if they still believe that in a few years.
But it's just insane just to think about. This is the most violent Doctor Who ever got in terms of some people. It's like, how? It's not violent at all.
Yeah. It's crazy what can change in a few decades. But then they freeze all the Cybermen, and we get the reverse footage of them bursting out. And it is very clearly reverse footage because the plastic sheen that they break through repairs itself. What I like is then everybody climbs up the hatch after they freeze the Cybermen, and the Doctor kind of goes like, "Well, the episode usually ends by this point. There's still 5 minutes to the episode, so he's like, okay, well, I'm going to electrify the hatch, and everyone has to go outside." And this is stuff that really doesn't super need to be in the episode, but I guess it brings us to the end, where he's resetting the trap essentially to the tomb of the Cybermen.
I do like it. It's a good way of being like, I don't want to destroy the Cybermen, that would be wrong, so I'm just making sure no humans ever come in. But to be fair, when the humans do come around, there's going to be dead bodies when they touch the door.
Oh yeah.
So the Doctor is going to kill some people, to be honest. Let's just say that.
Then we find out that the cyber leader has been alive this whole time. This is the third instance where someone's been pretending to be dead. And he gets up as the Doctor and Jamie are the last ones left in the tomb, and they're like, oh boy, we have to try and escape this situation. And you're like, oh no, what's going to happen? And it's a very last minute bit of tension.
It is, yes.
Like, there's literally 3 minutes in the episode left. Like... And the way they escape the cyber leader is so dumb. So, like, the Doctor hops to his right and then left again, then he goes, run! And Jamie runs around him, and the Doctor runs the other way, and you just see the cyber leader, like, turning on the spot, like, oh, no, oh, what? And, then, like...
and his arms are, like, outstretched like a zombie. It's just, like, really stiff movements.
So dumb.
But yeah, they run around in opposite directions just to confuse the Cyberman. And I think it's a bit too easy to confuse the Cyberman, the cyber leader.
Yeah. And then they go to close the door, and the Doctor realizes a massive flaw in his plan, in that when he closes the door, the circuit will be complete, and he will be electrocuted and die. So he's like, oh boy, how do I fix this? Go, quickly, Jamie, get some insulation or whatever. And then, very nicely, and I don't know if it was on purpose, but if you're looking at the bottom of the door in the reflection, you see the Cybermat crawling up towards them before we actually cut to the Cybermat that's crawling, and I thought that was a very cool little bit of cinematography.
And again, the Cybermat beeps, nobody hears it, so I presume it's just for the audience.
Yeah. But they start to push, they try to push the door closed, they're like, we can't do it. And then Toberman has his heroic moment of redemption, where he pushes them out the way and he slams the door closed himself. And we see him like struggling against the cyber leader, and it's a pretty cool little scene, I think, especially with the cyber leader being like, we must survive, and it's like this battle for the chance to live. It's very, very cool.
Apparently the crew members forgot that the guy playing the cyber controller was still in there, so they just sort of walked away offset, and the guy in the costume was like, guys, he's banging on the doors. He's like, I'm still in here, help.
Yikes.
But yes, I am glad Toberman still gets like a heroic moment at least, which doesn't make up for how he was portrayed in this episode, but it's a positive step at least. I don't know.
Yeah.
But again, the cyber controller kind of writhes around on the floor. And this is where also people are like, oh, this is too violent. This is too extreme. And it's like, oh, it's just some smoke and he's just sort of like shaking around on the floor. It's okay.
To be fair, there's quite a lot of death in this episode. Like, we see someone getting electrocuted by the doors in the first episode, then somebody gets shot, and then somebody gets shot again, and then they get beaten up by Cybermen, and then somebody gets shot, and then they're fighting with the Cybermen, and then somebody gets electrocuted again. Like, there's a lot of death.
Yeah.
But, you know, I definitely, by a modern eye, it's not violent in the slightest little bit.
And then Victoria's like, and then the crew of the spaceship are like, oh, do you guys want to come with us? And Victoria's like, oh no, we have our own flying machine. The pilot's like, flying machine? And then she's
What's
like,
a flying machine?
And then she's like, at least it works. And then I think his response afterwards should be, you mean you've had a spaceship this entire time? You've never told us.
You could have saved us all. 4 people have died.
Like, the entire reason we were waiting so long just to get the ship repaired, you didn't help us? You didn't save us? Like, bitch, excuse me?
But then the episode almost ends on like a cliffhanger where we see the Doctor and that walk off to the TARDIS. Then we see the Cybermat crawling along the floor as we look at Toberman's dead body, and then pan up to the Cyberman that's like imprinted on the tomb of the Cyberman. And it's like, ooh, the Cyberman could be coming back.
Yeah, the Doctor has like a moment where he says, what does he say again? Jamie's like, that really is the end of a Cyberman, isn't it? And then the Doctor's like, yes, Jamie. On the other hand, I never like to make predictions. And that bit was unscripted, which is a great little cliffhanger leading up suspense for the next time the Cyberman would appear, which would probably be in like 6 months.
Yeah. And that brings us to the end of this episode. We flew through this one. What do you think of this episode and then this whole story in general?
Good episode as a whole. It does feel like it ended and then we have to make more rooms so it ends again. Like, the whole bit where we go downstairs, and it does feel like it has two endings, I think, this episode.
Yeah, they beat the villain, and then they're like, and we beat the villain again in the last 3 minutes of the episode. Like,
But yeah, it's a good episode overall, and the story overall is just... I think I would show this to like people just who like classic film. It's a really... We just made fun of it for like 4 hours, but as a whole, I think the episode holds up really well. The sets are good, the direction is good, and when you consider like all the time constraints and all the technology that's been used in this episode, it holds up really well. It's like a classic film, I think.
yeah, I really enjoyed this episode quite a bit. I think this episode, more so than some of the other ones, flies by. Like this one, it's like action, 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 and then the episode ends, and it's really good. And I think this story as a whole is, for the Classic Who, like we've covered a couple of Classic Who episodes so far in our adventures in this podcast, and I think this one's possibly my favorite we've covered so far. Like, there's like next to no filler. The performances are all relatively strong. The Doctor's incredible in it. It's a very, very good story. And yeah, one I would be like, if you want to watch a good Classic Who episode, this one's really good. Like,
I mean, I chose this episode for a reason. It's considered to be one of the best and one of the best Cybermen episodes. And to celebrate 55 years of the Cybermen, you can't go wrong with this episode. Give it a rewatch if you haven't seen it for a while.
yeah. But I think that brings us to the end of this podcast.
Oh boy, a shortish one again.
Yeah,
well done to us.
Probably just under 2 hours, I would reckon, which is, for a Classic Who deep dive, for us, unheard of. But thank you very much for listening to this podcast. You can find us on Twitter at Watches Doctor, on Facebook at Who Watches Who, on YouTube at Who Watches Who. This podcast is available wherever you get podcasts, so make sure to subscribe and leave a review and thumbs up and etc. All the stuff you know how to do. Do you got something to say, Scott?
Next week we're doing our news end of month recap kind of thing we do every month, and we will be answering viewer questions. If you have anything, just feel free to send us a message on Facebook, Twitter, or our email address, which is whowatcheswhopod@gmail.com. Just send us a lovely message and we'll read it, unless it's not good. We won't read it if it's not good.
We'll read it out on the show, so make sure to email us in for next week, as we, because that's when the news will be out.
And to be honest, there's not much news.
No, the most news is Eccleston's doing more Big Finish. Spoiler alert. But,
oh my god, you just gave away our entire
whole
episode next week.
Yeah. Who knows? The Doctor Who trailer could be out by next week. You never know.
We're still holding up hope. There was rumours it was supposed to come out this week. Today is Thursday, spoiler alert. It hasn't come out yet, so...
We'll see.
We'll see.
But yeah, thank you very much for listening, and we will see you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.